The waitress had just set down the celebratory cheesecake when my father cleared his throat. I expected a toast to my master's degree, but instead, he asked me to sign away my future. He thought I was the obedient daughter who would nod and sacrifice everything for my sister, just like always, but when I finally whispered no, the silence at the table was louder than any scream. I was done being the backup plan. My name is Lauren Whitmore, and for 26 years, I had lived my life in the quiet corners of rooms dominated by my family. I sat in the corner booth of the Riverview Diner, a staple establishment in our small town of Briar Hollow, clutching a napkin under the table until my knuckles turned white. It was supposed to be a celebration. I had walked across the stage earlier that morning to receive my master's degree in business administration, a feat that had cost me 2 years of sleepless nights and isolation. Yet, looking around the table, I felt less like a guest of honor and more like a prop in a play directed by my parents. The diner smelled of frying bacon and old coffee, a scent that usually brought me comfort, but tonight it only added to the nausea churning in my stomach. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed with a low buzz that seemed to drill right into my temples. Across from me sat my older sister, Madeline Whitmore. She was 2 years older than me and possessed the kind of effortless charisma that sucked the oxygen out of any room. She was currently frowning at the laminated menu as if it had personally insulted her. "I cannot believe we are eating here," Madeline sighed, tossing the menu onto the sticky table. "I thought we were going to that French bistro in the city." My mother, Eleanor, immediately reached over and patted Madeline's hand, her face softening into that distinct look of adoration she reserved solely for my sister. "Now, Maddie, you know the bistro is fully booked for graduation weekend," Mom said soothingly. "Besides, Lauren likes this place. Don't you, dear?" I nodded, forcing a smile that did not reach my eyes. "It is fine. Mom, I like the pancakes here." "See, she likes the pancakes," Mom said, turning back to Madeline as if I had ceased to exist the moment I stopped speaking. It was a dynamic I knew well. When we were children, if Madeline scraped her knee, the whole house went into a state of emergency. If I broke my arm falling off the swing set, which actually happened when I was 7, I was told to stop crying and get in the car. Madeline was the golden child, the fragile glass doll that needed protecting. I was the rubber ball that was expected to bounce back no matter how hard I was thrown against the pavement. Tonight felt different, though, or perhaps I just desperately wanted it to be. My parents had insisted on this dinner. They had bought me a card. For the first time in my life, the spotlight was technically on me, even if the beam was flickering and weak. The waitress, a kind woman named Betty who had worked here for 30 years, approached our table with a massive tray. She set down a large, slightly lopsided chocolate cake with the words, "Congratulations," Lauren written in wobbly blue icing. "Here we go." "Hun," Betty said, winking at me. "On the house." "Thank you." "Betty," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My father, Robert, cleared his throat and stood up. He was a tall man who commanded attention not through charisma, but through a stern, unyielding presence. He buttoned his suit jacket, even though we were in a diner where truckers ate pie at the counter. He held up his glass of iced tea. "To Lauren," he began, his voice booming slightly, causing a few patrons at nearby tables to look over. "We are very proud of your achievement. A master's degree. That is no small thing." I felt a warmth bloom in my chest. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe they really did see me. "We have always valued education in this family," he continued, his gaze drifting from me to Madeline, who was picking the icing off the cake with a fork. "We have sacrificed a lot to ensure you girls have the best starts in life. Tuition, housing, allowances. We did it all because we believe in family." He looked back at me, but his eyes were hard, lacking the warmth his words suggested. "And now that you are educated and capable, Lauren, you are in a position to truly be part of this family's legacy. Success is not just about what you achieve for yourself. It is about what you can do for the people who got you there. He paused, a tight smile stretching his lips. You have a big responsibility now. Lauren, we expect you to step up. After all, what is the point of success if you cannot? Share the burden. He raised his glass higher. To family obligations. To family, Mom echoed, clinking her glass against his. To whatever, Madeline mumbled, finally taking a bite of the cake. I raised my glass, but the ice water suddenly tasted bitter. The phrase share the burden echoed in my mind, distinct and heavy. It did not sound like a congratulation. It sounded like an invoice. The warmth in my chest evaporated, replaced by a cold, creeping certainty that the other shoe was about to drop. The fork in my hand felt heavy, like a lead weight. I watched Madeline lick a smudge of blue icing from her thumb, oblivious to the tension radiating off me. My father's words about sharing the burden were not new. They were the chorus of a song I had been forced to memorize since I was 5 years old. I looked at the slice of cake Betty had placed in front of me. It reminded me of a Tuesday night back when I was 12. We were having meatloaf. There was one slice left. I had reached for it, hungry after soccer practice. But before my fork could touch the meat, my mother's hand had shot out, intercepting me. Lauren, let your sister have it, she had said, her voice soft but leaving no room for argument. She had a hard day at dance class. You are strong. You can wait until breakfast. I was strong. Madeline was delicate. That was the script. If Madeline failed a math test, it was because the teacher was incompetent, and my parents hired a private tutor for $50 an hour. If I brought home an A-, my father would look at the report card over the rim of his glasses and simply ask why it was not an A. My achievements were the baseline. My failures were inexcusable. Her failures were tragedies. Her achievements were miracles. I learned early on that the safest place to be was in the silence. If I did not ask for anything, I could not be denied. If I did not speak, I could not be told to shut up because Madeline had a headache. I built a fortress of quiet compliance, brick by brick, thinking that if I just followed the rules, eventually I would earn my keep. Eventually, they would look at me and see me, not just the support system for their golden child. My eyes flicked to my father, who was now dabbing his mouth with a paper napkin. He had just claimed credit for my success. We sacrificed, he had said. I almost laughed out loud. The absurdity of it clawed at my throat. They had not paid a single cent for my master's degree. I had worked 2 jobs, one as a barista and one filing papers at the university library, to pay my tuition. I lived in a studio apartment the size of a closet and ate instant noodles while Madeline drove the convertible they bought her for her 21st birthday. The sacrifice he spoke of was entirely mine, yet here he was, wearing it like a medal on his own chest. You are being awfully quiet. Low, Madeline said, her voice breaking through my memories. She pointed her fork at me. You usually have some boring story about your study group or whatever. I am just tired, Maddie, I replied, keeping my voice even. Well, do not be a downer, she said, rolling her eyes. This is a party. Mom reached out and squeezed my arm, her fingers digging in slightly. She is just overwhelmed. Aren't you, sweetie? It is a big day. I saw the look Mom shot Dad. It was a quick, sharp glance. A signal passed between conspirators before the trap is sprung. I had seen that look before. I saw it right before they told me I had to share my room with Madeline when she moved back home after dropping out of college the first time. I saw it right before they told me I could not go to summer camp because they needed the money for Madeline's modeling portfolio. My stomach twisted. The cake in front of me looked gray under the diner lights. Actually, Dad said, shifting in his seat. He placed both hands flat on the table, a gesture of dominance he used in board meetings, since we are all here and everyone is in good spirits. There is something we need to discuss, something important regarding the future. The air in the booth seemed to vanish. The clatter of silverware from the other tables faded into a dull roar in my ears. I knew that tone. It was the tone of a transaction where I was the currency. "What is it?" I asked. My voice steady despite the trembling in my hands beneath the table. Mom smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. It was a tight, brittle expression. "We just want what is best for everyone." "Lauren, you know that, don't you?" I did not answer. I just watched them, the three of them, a united front against the outsider sitting in their midst. I gripped my napkin tighter, bracing myself for the blow I knew was coming. Dad did not even blink when he dropped the bomb. He simply folded his hands over his plate, looked me dead in the eye, and spoke as if he were ordering a side of fries rather than dismantling my financial future. "We have been reviewing the estate planning," he said, his voice level and authoritative, "and we have decided that it is in the best interest of the family if you sign a waiver relinquishing your claim to the inheritance. We want to designate Madeline as the sole beneficiary." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. The clatter of silverware from the booth behind us seemed to stop. The hum of conversation in the diner vanished, leaving me in a vacuum of silence where only his words existed. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "It is simple math, Lauren," he continued, not a shred of hesitation in his tone. "You have a master's degree now. You are employable. You have a career ahead of you. You are going to be fine." He gestured vaguely toward Madeline, who was now tracing the rim of her water glass with a manicured finger, refusing to look at me. "Your sister. Well, Madeline has different needs. Dad said she is an artist. Her path is not as linear as yours. She needs a safety net. She needs the house and the savings to ensure she is taken care of." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You want me to give up my half everything because I worked hard enough to get a degree. It is not about punishing you." "Sweetheart," Mom chimed in, her voice dripping with that sickly sweet syrup she used whenever she wanted to manipulate me. She reached across the table, trying to take my hand, but I pulled it back. "It is about equity. You are the strong one. Lauren, you always have been. You do not need our help to survive. Madeline, she is delicate. She needs this more than you do." I looked at Madeline. She was still staring at her water glass, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. It was not guilt. It was anticipation. She knew this was coming. They had discussed this without me. "So, because I studied," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "because I worked 2 jobs and barely slept for 2 years to build a future, I get nothing. And because she dropped out of 3 different colleges, she gets everything." "Watch your tone," Dad snapped, his face darkening. The mask of the proud father slipped, revealing the controlling patriarch underneath. "We are not discussing her academic record. We are discussing family. We raised you. We put clothes on your back and food in your stomach for 18 years. We gave you the foundation to go out and get that degree. That was our gift to you. You owe us." "I owe you," I repeated, the absurdity of it choking me. "I owe you my future because you did the bare minimum of raising a child." "Do not be dramatic," Mom whispered, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. "We are just asking you to do the right thing. Why would you want to take money away from your sister when you are capable of earning your own? It seems..." Greedy. Lauren. The word hit me like a physical slap. Greedy. I was wearing a dress I bought at a thrift store. I drove a car that rattled when it went over 40 miles per hour. Madeline was wearing a designer watch that cost more than my rent for 3 months. "This isn't a request, is it?" I asked, looking from Mom to Dad. Dad leaned back, crossing his arms. "It is a decision. We have the paperwork drawn up. We just need your signature to make it smooth. We thought tonight, with everyone together, would be the right time to settle it." Madeline finally looked up. Her blue eyes were wide, feigning innocence, but there was a hardness behind them that I recognized. "Come on, low," Madeline said, her voice soft, almost pleading. You know I am not good with money like you are. If I do not have the trust, I do not know what I will do. You are the smart one. You will be rich anyway. I looked around the table. The half-eaten cake, the melting ice in the glasses, the expectant faces of the 3 people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They were not asking me for a favor. They were stripping me clean to keep their golden child warm. You want me to sign it now? I asked, my voice flat. We have the papers in the car, Dad said, nodding. We can get a notary tomorrow, but we want your verbal agreement tonight. We want to know you are on board with the family. The silence returned, heavier this time. It pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. They were waiting for the nod. They were waiting for the obedient Lauren to smile and say, Of course, whatever Maddie needs. But the obedient Lauren had died somewhere between the appetizer and the dessert. I looked at the 3 of them, sitting there like a panel of judges waiting for the accused to plead guilty. For years, I had bent myself into pretzel shapes to fit into the small, suffocating box they had built for me. I had stayed quiet. I had studied hard. I had made myself invisible so Madeline could shine. But looking at my father's expectant face and my mother's manipulative pout, something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap, like a branch breaking in a storm. It was quiet, like a lock clicking into place. This was the line. If I crossed it, if I signed those papers, I would never be a person to them. I would just be a resource, an organ donor for their golden child's lifestyle. I placed my hands on the table to steady the shaking that was starting in my fingertips. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of stale coffee and grease, and looked directly at my father. No, I said. The word hung in the air, heavy and solid. My father blinked, his brow furrowing as if I had spoken in a foreign language. Excuse me, he asked, his voice dropping an octave. No, I repeated, my voice stronger this time. I will not sign it. I will not give up my inheritance. The temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. My mother gasped, pressing a hand to her chest as if I had just slapped her. Lauren. You cannot be serious, Mom whispered, her eyes wide with performative shock. After everything we just explained, after we told you how much your sister needs this, I heard you, I said, feeling a strange calmness wash over me. I heard that you want to take what is legally mine and give it to Madeline because you do not think she is capable of taking care of herself, and you do not think I matter enough to say no. That is not what we said, Dad snapped, his voice rising enough that the couple in the next booth turned to look. Stop twisting our words. You are being incredibly selfish. Lauren, I thought we raised you better than this. Greed is an ugly look on you. It is not greed. Dad, I shot back, not lowering my gaze. It is self-respect. There is a difference. Self-respect, Dad scoffed, his face turning a shade of red I associated with his high blood pressure. You are talking about hurting your family, your own sister. Look at her. I looked at Madeline. She was not crying. She looked furious. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and her eyes were narrowing in a way that made her look exactly like our father. You have always been jealous of me, Madeline hissed, dropping the sweet facade completely. You just want to see me fail. I do not care if you fail or succeed. Maddie, I said calmly, that is the point. It is not my job to fund your life anymore. Lower your voice, Mom hissed, noticing the stares we were attracting. A waitress paused near our table with a pot of coffee, pretending to wipe down a counter but clearly listening. People are watching. You are embarrassing us. I am embarrassing you, I asked, letting out a dry, humorless laugh. You just asked your daughter to disinherit herself over pancakes on her graduation night. I think you embarrassed yourselves. For the first time in 26 years, The urge to apologize, to smooth things over, to say I am sorry. I did not mean it, was completely absent. I felt light. I felt dangerous. Then Madeline slammed her hand down on the table, causing the silverware to jump. But you have to sign it, she shrieked, her voice cracking. I already put the non-refundable deposit down on the loft. Mom said the money would be there by Monday. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked from Madeline to my mother. Mom looked away, studying the pattern on the vinyl booth seat. You already spent it, I said, the realization settling over me like a cold rain. You did not just decide this tonight. You have been planning this for weeks. You promised her my money before you even asked me. It is family money, Lauren Dad barked, slamming his fist on the table. It belongs to who needs it. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I forced them to hold me. I grabbed my purse from the seat. Happy graduation to me, I said. If you walk out that door, Dad threatened, pointing a shaking finger at me. Do not expect us to come running after you. You are turning your back on this family. I think you all turned your backs on me a long time ago, I replied. I turned and walked away. I walked past the waitress who looked at me with pity. I walked past the families celebrating birthdays and anniversaries. I pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped out into the cool night air of Briar Hollow. Behind me, I could still hear Madeline starting to scream, but for the first time in my life, her tantrums were not my problem to fix. I got into my rusted sedan, my hands shaking so hard I could barely put the key in the ignition, and drove away, leaving the half-eaten cake and my former life behind me. The 48 hours following the disaster at the diner were not spent in tears. Instead, I spent them in front of my laptop, fueled by cold coffee and a burning need to understand the mechanics of my own betrayal. I still had the administrative access to my parents' home network, a privilege I had been granted years ago when I set up their digital filing system because they were too technologically illiterate to do it themselves. I realized now that their incompetence was actually my weapon. I logged into the family trust portal. What I found was not a retirement fund, but a crime scene of financial mismanagement. I scrolled through the transaction history, my eyes widening with every line item. On the 3rd of March, there was a transfer of $4,000 to Madeline's account labeled Rent Assistance. On the 15th of March, another transfer of $2,500 labeled Credit Card Payoff. On the 2nd of April, a wire of $6,000 for car lease. It went on like this for pages. I did the math in my head. Over the last 18 months, my parents had funneled nearly $85,000 into Madeline's lifestyle. Then I found the folder marked Estate Planning. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened the PDF file dated 2 months prior. It was a draft of a revised will. I scanned the legal jargon until I found the distribution clause. It was already done. They had already assigned the family home, the life insurance policies, and the antique collection solely to Madeline. The waiver they had tried to bully me into signing at the diner was not for their assets. It was for my grandmother's irrevocable trust. It was the only pool of money they could not legally touch without my consent, and it was the only thing left that had not been drained dry. I needed confirmation. I picked up my phone and dialed my Aunt Linda. She was my mother's sister, a woman who loved gossip almost as much as she loved gin and tonics. Lauren Aunt Linda answered on the second ring, her voice hushed. "Oh, honey, I heard about the scene at the diner. Your mother is telling everyone you had a nervous breakdown. I am fine, Aunt Linda," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I just need to know something, and I need you to be honest with me. What is it? Did you know Mom and Dad are broke?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I did not know for sure, Aunt Linda stammered. "But your father asked Uncle Jerry for a loan last Christmas. He said it was for a business investment, but, well, Jerry saw Madeline driving that new car a week later. How much?" "Linda, $15,000, she whispered. Lauren, they said. They said if they did not get the money, they were going to miss a mortgage payment. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. The puzzle pieces slammed together to form a grotesque picture. They were not just favoring Madeline, they were drowning because of her. They had cannibalized their own retirement, maxed out their credit, and borrowed from family to keep Madeline's delusion of a high society life afloat. The request at the diner was not about equity. It was a desperate, last-ditch attempt to liquidate the final asset they had access to me before the whole house of cards collapsed. I was not a daughter to them. I was a piggy bank they were waiting to smash open. I looked at the stack of printed bank statements and legal drafts on my desk. For years, I had stayed silent to keep the peace. I had let them erase me to keep the family picture perfect. But looking at the numbers, seeing the mathematical proof of how little I meant to them, something inside me hardened into steel. I was not going to run away. I was not going to hide. They wanted a legal battle. They wanted to talk about money and what was fair. Fine. I organized the papers into a neat stack. Okay, I said to the empty room. If you want a war, I will give you one. I was not surprised when Madeline showed up at my door the next evening. She pounded on the wood like the police were conducting a raid. When I opened it, she breezed past me without an invitation, smelling of expensive perfume and nervous sweat. She paced around my small living room, her heels clicking aggressively on the laminate floor. You have to sign the papers. Lauren, Madeline said, not even looking at me. She was picking at her cuticles, a nervous tic I had not seen since we were teenagers. Mom and Dad are freaking out. You are making everyone miserable. I am making people miserable, I asked, leaning against the doorframe to keep my distance. I am not the one draining their retirement accounts. Madeline froze mid-step. She turned to look at me, her eyes wide and panicked. You looked. Of course I looked. I know about the transfers. I know about the car lease. I know everything. So what, she snapped, crossing her arms defensively across her chest. They are my parents, too. They want to help me. Why is that a crime? It is not a crime to help, I replied calmly, watching her unravel. But it is a crime to steal my inheritance to cover your mistakes. Why do you need grandmother's trust fund? Maddie, you have already taken $85,000 from Mom and Dad in the last 18 months. It is complicated, she yelled, throwing her hands up in the air. You would not understand. You have your boring little job and your boring little life. I have expenses. I have a standard to maintain, a standard you cannot afford. She deflated slightly, sinking onto my couch as if her legs had suddenly given out. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her porcelain facade. She looked tired. She looked terrified. It is not just expenses, she whispered, staring at the floor. I owe people money, real money, not like owing Dad for a credit card bill. What kind of people? Investors, she said quickly, though her eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. I tried to start a fashion line. It did not work out. I borrowed $50,000 from a private lender. It was supposed to be easy to pay back once the brand took off. But it flopped, and now the interest is piling up. It is over $70,000 now. I stared at her, stunned by the sheer magnitude of her recklessness. $70,000. And you thought the solution was to bully me into giving up my future so you could wipe your slate clean. It is the only way, Madeline cried, her voice rising to a shrill pitch that made me wince. Mom and Dad are tapped out. You saw the accounts. If I do not pay this by the end of the month, they are going to come after me. I could lose everything. My reputation, my friends. You are worried about your reputation, I asked, stepping closer to her, my anger simmering just below the surface. Madeline, you are drowning, and you are trying to use me as a life raft. Do you have any idea how selfish that is? You have always had it easy, she spat back. tears welling in her eyes. "You are smart. You are disciplined. Things just work out for you. I need help. I have always needed help. Mom and Dad knew that. They cleared the path because they knew I would trip if they didn't. Why can't you just help me this one time?" This one time I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound that filled the small room. "It has been your whole life. You got the car. You got the tuition. You got the apartment. And now you want the trust fund. When does it end?" "Maddie, when I am destitute." She stood up, wiping her eyes angrily. The fear was still there, but the entitlement was stronger. It was the entitlement of someone who had never heard the word no without a safety net appearing beneath them. "You are my sister," she said, her voice dropping to a demanding growl. "You are supposed to protect me. If you do not sign those papers, you are ruining my life on purpose. You are doing this out of spite because you were never the favorite. I am not doing this out of spite," I said, opening the door and gesturing for her to leave. "I am doing this because for the first time in my life, I am putting myself first. I am not your bank account, Madeline, and I am not your savior. You will regret this," she said, her voice trembling with rage as she stepped into the hallway. "If I go down, I am taking the whole family down with me." "You already have," I replied, and shut the door in her face. The certified letter arrived 2 days later. It was not a handwritten note from my mother or a furious text from my father. It was a formal document from a law firm my father had used for years, printed on heavy cream paper. The letter stated that my refusal to cooperate with the family estate restructuring was viewed as a hostile act. It went on to threaten a lawsuit for breach of verbal contract regarding familial support, and implied they would petition the court to have me removed as a beneficiary on the grounds of undue malice toward my sister. It included a final line that chilled me to the bone. They were prepared to formally disown me, cutting all legal and social ties. If I did not comply within 72 hours, I did not cry. The time for tears had passed. I took the letter and my stack of financial evidence to Northline Civic Advisory, a small but aggressive firm recommended by a friend from business school. I sat across from Elias Vance, a forensic accountant and legal consultant with a face carved out of granite. He reviewed the documents in silence for nearly 20 minutes while the clock on the wall ticked rhythmically. "This is aggressive," Vance said, finally looking up. He tapped the draft waiver my parents had tried to force on me. "Ms. Whitmore, did you read the fine print on page 4? I skimmed it," I admitted. I was too angry to read every word. "Clause 7, Vance said, turning the paper toward me. "It retroactively approves all prior disbursements from the grandmother's trust. If you sign this, you are not just giving up your future claim. You are retroactively validating every unauthorized withdrawal they have made in the past 10 years. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What are you saying I am saying?" Vance continued, his voice devoid of emotion. "That based on the trust statements you accessed, your parents have likely already removed about 15% of the principal. That is illegal. It is embezzlement. If you sign this, you are helping them cover up a crime. They need your signature to avoid prison, not just to buy your sister a condo." My hands shook as I realized the depth of their betrayal. They were not just protecting Madeline, they were using me as a shield for their own corruption. "What do?" I asked. "We file a countersuit," Vance said. "We petition for a full accounting of the trust and removal of your parents as trustees. But I have to warn you, Lauren, in a town like Briar Hollow, this will get ugly. The court of public opinion does not wait for evidence." He was right. By the time I left his office, the whispers had already started. My mother had been busy. She had gone to the church, the country club, and the local market, spinning a tale of an ungrateful daughter abandoning a sick sister. Madeline had apparently invented a vague, stress-induced illness to garner sympathy. The consequences were immediate. I had spent months securing a position as a junior analyst at a marketing firm in the city. It was my ticket out, my financial independence. 3 days after my visit to Northline, my phone rang. Ms. Whitmore, the HR director said, her voice icy. We are calling to rescind our offer of employment. Excuse me. I gripped the phone, my heart hammering. On what grounds we have received several concerning character references, she replied. We were informed of pending litigation involving family fraud. We need employees with integrity and stability. We cannot have that kind of drama associated with our firm. That is slander, I exclaimed, fighting to keep my voice steady. My parents are lying to you because I caught them stealing from me. We have made our decision, she said, and the line went dead. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the grocery store, staring at the blank screen of my phone. I had lost my parents. I had lost my sister. And now, I had lost my career. I looked out the window and saw Mrs. Gable, my third-grade teacher, walking toward the entrance. When she saw me, she frowned deeply and turned her head away, refusing to acknowledge my existence. The isolation was suffocating. It would have been so easy to give up. It would have been so easy to drive to my parents' house, sign the paper, and beg for them to fix my reputation. They wanted me to break. They were counting on my fear. But as I watched Mrs. Gable walk away, I felt something shift inside me. They had taken everything they could take. There was nothing left to lose, which meant there was nothing left to fear. I started the engine. I was not going to their house. I was going back to Vance's office. You want a fight? I whispered to the empty car. I will give you a war. The summons arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning, taped unceremoniously to my front door by a process server who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. Whitmore versus Whitmore. Seeing my name listed as the defendant against my own parents felt like a punch to the gut, but the nausea passed quickly, replaced by the cold, hard resolve that had been building inside me for weeks. They had actually done it. They had sued me for refusing to be their victim. By noon, the story had hit the local rumor mill, twisted into a grotesque parody of the truth. My mother had been busy. According to the whispers in town, I was not the daughter defending her grandmother's legacy. I was the jealous, unstable sister trying to steal money from a sibling battling a mysterious, life-threatening illness. I went to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription for migraines, and the cashier, a woman I had known since high school, slammed my change onto the counter without making eye contact. I hope you are happy, she muttered as I picked up the receipt. Madeline is so fragile, and you are just kicking her when she is down. I walked out without a word. The isolation was absolute, but isolation gives you clarity, and while my parents were busy winning the court of public opinion, Elias Vance was busy winning the war of evidence. I was sitting in Vance's office when the intercom buzzed. Mr. Vance, the receptionist said, her voice crackling with excitement. There is a Mr. Arthur Henderson here to see you. He says he has information regarding the Whitmore estate. Vance's eyebrows shot up. Send him in. Arthur Henderson was a small, nervous man who had been my parents' accountant for 15 years before he abruptly retired 4 years ago, or so I had thought. He walked in, clutching a brown leather briefcase to his chest like a shield. Lauren, he said, nodding at me, his eyes darting around the room. I heard about the lawsuit. I saw what they are saying about you in the paper. I could not sit by and watch it happen. Why are you here? Arthur, I asked. I did not retire. Lauren, Arthur said, his voice trembling slightly. Your father fired me. He fired me because I refused to certify the quarterly reports for the trust. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of yellowing documents. They did not just take money out, Arthur explained, sliding the papers across the desk to Vance. They forged your grandmother's signature on a modification deed 6 months after her stroke. She was nonverbal at the time. There is no way she signed this. It gave them power of attorney to liquidate the bond portfolio, which was supposed to be untouchable until you turned 30. Vance scanned the documents, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. "This is fraud," Vance stated flatly. "This is Class B felony fraud, and if we present this at the hearing, your parents are not just losing the lawsuit, they are going to prison." The reality of it hung in the room. Prison. My parents. Later that afternoon, I ran into Madeline at the coffee shop near the courthouse. It was inevitable in a town this small. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and looking over her shoulder, clearly trying to avoid being seen. When she saw me, she flinched. "Stay away from me," she hissed, pulling her coat tighter around herself. They forged Grandma's signature. "Maddie," I said, keeping my voice low. "We have the documents. We have Arthur Henderson." Madeline froze. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking paler than her fake illness ever could. "Arthur," she whispered. "But Dad said he moved to Florida. Dad lied," I said, stepping closer. "Just like he lied about the money. Just like he lied to you about being able to fix this. If you go into that courtroom and lie for them, if you claim you did not know where the money came from, you are going to be an accessory to fraud. Do you really want to go to jail for a loft apartment you cannot afford?" I did not know," Madeline stammered, her hands shaking. "I just signed what they told me to sign. They said it was my money. Ignorance is not a defense when the evidence is this clear." I told her, "The hearing is in 48 hours. You need to decide whose side you are on, the truth, or the sinking ship." Madeline looked at me, her eyes filling with real tears this time. She looked terrified, stripped of her golden child armor. She opened her mouth to speak, but her phone buzzed. It was Mom. Madeline stared at the screen, then back at me, terror warring with habit. I have to go," she said, and bolted out the door. But I saw the hesitation. I saw the crack in the facade. My parents were still posting confident updates on social media, acting like they were the wronged heroes protecting their sick child. They had no idea that the ground beneath them had already turned to quicksand. The hearing was coming, and for the first time, I was not afraid to speak. I was just waiting for the gavel to fall. The air in the courtroom was so stiff it felt like it could snap. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table, dressed in their Sunday best. My mother dabbed at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, playing the role of the heartbroken matriarch to perfection, while my father stared straight ahead, his jaw set in a line of grim determination. They looked confident. They thought they were the heroes of this story. Their lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Ors Sterling, who charged $400 an hour, stood up to make his opening argument. He painted a picture of a family in crisis and a daughter who had turned her back on them out of spite. "Your Honor," Sterling said, pacing before the bench, "we are here to enforce a verbal contract. The Whitmore family has always operated on a system of mutual support. The defendant, Lauren Whitmore, has benefited from this system for 26 years. Now, when the family requires her cooperation to assist a sibling in medical distress, she is reneging on her obligations due to petty jealousy. Her parents have been nothing but prudent stewards of the family assets." Elias Vance, sitting beside me, did not even look up from his notepad. He just smiled a small, predatory smile. Sterling had just walked right into the trap. "Prudent stewards," Vance repeated as he stood up for cross-examination. "That is an interesting choice of words. Counselor." Vance walked to the center of the room, holding the file Arthur Henderson had given us. "Your Honor, the defense submits evidence Exhibit A through F. These are the original trust documents established by the defendant's grandmother, alongside the bank ledgers from the past 3 years. My father stiffened. I saw his hand twitch on the table. "Mr. Sterling claims the parents acted as stewards," Vance continued, his voice rising. "But these records show that over $85,000 was siphoned from the estate for non-medical expenses. Leased luxury vehicles, loft apartments, designer clothing, and, most damning of all, a modification deed signed by the grandmother 6 months after she suffered a debilitating stroke that left her paralyzed on her right side. Vance turned to the back of the room. "We call Arthur Henderson to the stand." My mother gasped audibly. My father turned pale, his confidence evaporating in a single second. Arthur walked up to the stand, nervous but determined. Under oath, he confirmed everything. "She could not have signed that deed," Arthur said, his voice shaking but clear. "I was there. Robert, Mr. Whitmore." He held her hand and forced the pen across the paper. "She was crying." She could not speak, but she was crying. "Liar," my father shouted, slamming his fist onto the table. "He is a disgruntled employee." "This is slander order," the judge barked, banging his gavel. "Mr. Whitmore, one more outburst and I will hold you in contempt." But the damage was done. The room buzzed with energy. Vance turned his attention to Madeline. She was called to the stand next. She looked small in the witness chair, her eyes darting between our parents and me. "Ms. Whitmore," Vance asked, "were you aware that the money funding your lifestyle was obtained through fraud? Madeline stammered. She looked at Dad, who was glaring at her with a mix of fury and desperation. She looked at Mom, who was weeping into her hands. Then she looked at me. She saw the evidence. She saw the sinking ship. "I did not know," Madeline said, her voice trembling. "They told me it was my money. They said they were handling it. I am a victim here too. I did not know they were stealing." Madeline, Mom, shrieked, looking at her golden child in horror. "How can you say that the betrayal was complete? They had sacrificed everything for her, and the moment it became inconvenient, she threw them to the wolves. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the stand, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. The judge looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Whitmore," the judge said, "why did you refuse the request at the diner? Was it, as the plaintiff suggests, about the money?" I took a deep breath. For years, I had rehearsed this speech in my head, usually while crying in the shower or driving alone at night. Now, I could finally say it. "It was never about the money, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady and ringing through the silent room. "If they had asked me for help because they were hungry, I would have given them everything. But they did not ask for help. They demanded a sacrifice. For my entire life, I have been the backup plan. I was the spare part they kept on the shelf in case their masterpiece broke. They did not want my signature to save the family. They wanted it to erase me. They wanted to strip me of the one thing my grandmother left specifically for me, just to keep up the illusion that they are perfect parents raising a perfect daughter." I looked directly at my parents. My father was slumped in his chair, defeated. My mother was staring at the floor. I realized that night in the diner that no amount of money, no amount of sacrifice, would ever be enough for them. I continued. I could set myself on fire to keep them warm, and they would still complain that I was not burning bright enough. So I chose to stop burning. I stopped speaking. The courtroom was completely silent. There was no whispering, no shuffling of papers, just the heavy, suffocating weight of the truth hanging in the air, undeniable and irreversible. The judge looked from me to my parents, and then down at his notes, his face hardening into a look of finality. The judge did not drag out the inevitable. He adjusted his glasses, looked down at the pile of damning evidence Vance had submitted, and delivered a ruling that shattered my parents' world in less than 5 minutes. "The court finds no merit in the plaintiff's claim of a verbal contract," Judge Reynolds stated, his voice booming off the mahogany walls. "Furthermore, given the substantial evidence of forgery and misappropriation of funds presented by the defense, I am dismissing this suit with prejudice. I am also referring the matter of the grandmother's estate modification to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal investigation regarding fraud and elder abuse." The gavel came down with a sharp crack that sounded like a gunshot. My mother let out a strangled sob, burying her face in her hands. The mask of the grieving, noble mother had completely disintegrated, leaving behind only a terrified woman realizing she was about to trade her country club membership for a defense attorney's retainer. My father sat frozen, his face gray, staring at the table as if he could not comprehend how his authority had been stripped away so easily. The reporter from the local paper, who had been scribbling furiously in the back row, already had his headline. The myth of the perfect Whitmore family was dead. By tomorrow morning, everyone in Briar Hollow would know that their lifestyle was built on theft and lies. I packed my bag slowly. Madeline stood up, looking lost. She took a step toward our parents, but Dad turned on her, his eyes blazing with the fury of a drowning man looking for someone to blame. "You," Dad hissed, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You admitted it on the stand. You gave them everything they needed." I was scared," Madeline cried, shrinking back. "You told me to tell the truth. I did not want to go to jail." "Well, you might be going anyway," Vance said, stepping between me and them as he closed his briefcase. "Receiving stolen funds is a crime. Ms. Whitmore, I suggest you get your own lawyer. Your parents are going to be busy with theirs." Madeline looked at me then. Her eyes were pleading, begging me to fix it, to step in and be the responsible one, to take the fall like I always did. "Lauren," she whispered, "please." I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity, no guilt. She was a stranger to me. "Goodbye, Madeline," I said. I turned my back on them. The silence that followed me as I walked down the center aisle was heavier than any screaming match we had ever had. It was the sound of a bridge burning, collapsing into the water below, never to be rebuilt. I walked out of the heavy double doors of the courthouse and stepped into the blinding afternoon sun. I was alone. My phone was silent. I had no job, no family, and uncertain prospects. But as I took a deep breath of the fresh air, filling my lungs without that crushing weight on my chest, I realized I was rich. I had my freedom. I had my name. And most importantly, I had the truth. An hour later, I pulled into the gravel lot of the Riverview Diner. It seemed fitting to end it where it began. I walked inside and sat in the same corner booth where my father had demanded I sign my life away. The booth was empty now. Betty walked over, her face softening when she saw me. She had heard the news. Everyone had. "Hey, hun," she said gently. "Coffee, no," I said, looking at the laminated menu. "I would like the chocolate cheesecake, a whole slice, and put a candle in it." Betty smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "What are we celebrating?" "My life," I replied. "It just started today." When she brought the cake, the flame flickered in the draft of the air conditioner. I did not make a wish. I did not need to wish for things anymore. I had the power to make them happen myself. I blew out the candle, watching the thin trail of smoke rise up and disappear. I took a bite of the cake. It tasted sweet, rich, and completely mine. The shadow was gone. I was finally standing in the light. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long and difficult journey, but I am glad I finally found the strength to stand up for myself. I would love to hear from you guys. Please comment down below where you are listening from and share your thoughts on the verdict. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, please make sure to subscribe to the Victoria Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.